welcome to a new episode of the Geopolitical Pickle. Today we will be touching upon a situation that is really on the focus because of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, which is sportswashing. And for that, I will have as always my colleague Ronan Wordsworth, master in geopolitics officially. Can we give a little bit of an applause?
Well done. We did already give me congratulations before, so I don't want to take too much credit. But now today we had the actual ceremony, which was great. Have my degree, and you can call me master of geopolitics. That's fine.
Master of geopolitics, master of the universe.
Sounds also fine. That's if you want to call me master of the universe. Also acceptable.
Master of the universe. Okay, we will also have Milos Dangubic. He's usual already in our podcast, so thank you very much for being here. How are you doing, Milos?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to talking about this very interesting topic, and it's ready for a final.
Newly published author as well.
Newly published author, of course. Yeah, please.
Since his last episode,
In next episodes, please introduce me as published author.
As published author. And today we have for the first time, and maybe not the only one, we have Owen Sutherland. He's studying a master's in geopolitics and he's analyzed sports washing now in the context of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. So thank you, Owen, for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, you are. How are you feeling? Apart from excited, what do you think about this sports washing, just like in the beginning?
Just like very roughly, I think it's a really interesting topic that it's been going on for over a century now, but I think this World Cup's really highlighted it, which is why I think it's interesting that they've chosen Qatar has been the most publicised one for it, so yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, then we'll get a little bit deeper into that. Guys, I would like to start a little bit different today because I would like to ask you one question. I saw that I was when I was doing the research, I stumbled upon this podcast where they did it. And I think it's pretty cool. What is the sports moment that you would point out in your life that was the most significant for you? And more or less, like, what did you feel? Ronan?
Okay, on a personal level, that's easy. Actually, we didn't know these questions were coming, by the way. So
no. You're gonna go. I wanted to get the raw reaction.
Is like my Australian football team, Sydney Swans, winning the grand final in 2012 because I was there, and just it was a close game until the very end, and just the moment the final whistle rang, and we just kicked a goal to win the game basically, and it was just pure euphoria. I remember being with my mum and she was in tears hugging me, and it's just like that raw emotion that I think only sport can give you. And I mean, you guys are grinning now. I think you know that exact emotion that I'm talking about. If you want any
more information of what Australian football is, you can look for it because maybe
AFL, Aussie rules, like find out. It's because people won't know. And you might say it looks like Quidditch or something, but it's great.
Quidditch.
That's what I've heard a few times.
Really? I mean, it's a wrong.
I heard people say Quidditch because when you say, there's four posts at each end of the field. It's played on a big oval, and
you're just like in the rooms. That is true. You definitely have the magicians.
You can use drones instead of rooms.
Owen, what would be that moment for you?
I'd say Australia versus India, Sydney Test match, Michael Clark scoring the triple century. We were there live. It was the Pink Day, the breast cancer support day. So everyone dresses... The Jane McGrath Day. So everyone dresses up in bright pink clothes. 30,000 people in bright pink clothes for charity and that. And just demolishing India. Beautiful sight, really.
That actually looks really, really good. When was that?
Oh, that would have been
2011
or
9. Something, but
it was around that area because it's when I was first really getting into cricket.
Yeah,
and we went up there, and it was just beautiful to watch.
I don't understand cricket. It's something that I really like. Games last too long. It's just like I don't know.
Nothing better than a 5-day sport.
Nothing better. It's definitely
you have tea and you have lunch and tea breaks.
Right now, the sport made against ADHD people.
Like right now, they're doing the day-night test in Adelaide, so they have the dinner breaks.
Yeah, dinner break.
They had to run hot cocoa on the field today because the West Indians were cold.
Oh my god, that's actually really interesting. Milos, what will be yours?
I would go with more popular sport. I would say for me it was when I was a kid. I think I was 8 years old. It was World Cup, but in basketball. It was in Indianapolis in USA, and the Yugoslavian team beat the USA. I think it was quarterfinal, and I was kid, and when you're kids, sports is one of the most important things for you in the life. And then we later went on to win the World Cup. So it's a very nice memory. especially because I was a kid.
How did you celebrate that?
I stayed up because it was it was played in USA, different time zone, and I was just full of joy and excitement. But unfortunately, because it was late, I had to go to sleep.
Okay, we won, but now go to sleep.
Probably it was a school night for a quarterfinals against USA.
That's pretty interesting.
And yours?
For me, I mean, I'm Spanish. I'm Spanish, and I like football. This one's pretty easy.
Sergio Aguero.
Excuse me? Sergio Aguero is Argentinian. Come on.
I know that. So I just wanted to get that in there somehow.
No, for me it was the 11th of July, 2010. Andres Iniesta scored in the minute 115 and a lot seconds, almost in the 116, 1-0 against Germany. And that was at first I almost got a couple heart attacks. I remember that there was this old lady sitting beside me while watching the game, and I was just like literally on my knees, like literally with my hands on my face, just like I cannot see this. I mean, I remember Robin like almost scoring in the extra time and everything. I was just like, every time I was, and this poor old lady just touching my shoulder, being like, "Don't worry, son, don't worry, they're gonna do it.
It'll be alright."
Words of encouragement.
And then Iniesta scored, and that was just like crazy. That was something like, I cried until I went to sleep. I mean, it was just like incredible. I don't know. It was something we weren't expecting it. So
it's crazy. Like nothing can bring people together.
And that is why I had the questions. That's why I had these questions, because when we are going to be talking about sports washing, for me it's interesting to see how, because sometimes when we talk about soft power, which is what we are going to be talking about, soft power is the influence that a country or an individual or a company may have, that it's not based on violence or military action, and so
traditional realist
exactly
power,
traditional realist, so it's in a cultural way, but how this culture actually is so effective in my opinion, because it touches the feelings of the people that are watching it, and that's why in my opinion it's really, really interesting to analyze what we are going to do today. So I would like to start just by defining a little bit what is sports washing. Just as a little introduction, sports washing is a term that was coined in 2015, so it's a relatively recent term, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened before. It's just like it wasn't that pointed out in a way. The definition that we could have, I mean, there's no official. We are social scientists here. We keep on changing the definitions, but we could more or less agree on an individual, a group, a corporation, or a nation state that uses sport to improve its reputation and public image, both outside and inside of their borders or their spheres of influence. And with that, knowing more or less what it is, let's start from now, then we go a little bit to the past.
I was going to say, I think now we start with Qatar, because I think there's been a lot of criticism leveled at the World Cup being awarded to Qatar, which some of it is directed towards FIFA, the governing football body, because there's a lot of corruption accusations against them. But then a lot of it's been leveled against the Qatari state, and things such as LGBT rights, worker rights, and corruption within the government have all been used as an accusation of sports washing by Qatari state to legitimize the regime, basically. So, what do you guys think to start with about the allegations, basically, that this is a sports washing World Cup?
I mean,
Owen, you can start,
I personally agree with it. I think, looking back 2015, I think more than half of the FIFA executive committee members who are the 22 people who get to decide who hosts World Cups, over half of them have been charged with corruption or have charges pending. Some of them, like Jack Warner, the Caribbean guy, is evading US police, so there's still some charges pending. But I think when you have out of 22 members, over 15 being alleged corruption or anything, that it's obviously something that needs to be noted, that it wasn't a fair shake of the bottle, I guess, to use an Australian term, on who got the World Cup.
I mean, and it's clearly proven. I mean, it's proven by all the commissions. The United States Supreme Court named, dictaminated that FIFA was a mafia type organization.
Exactly. So I think
crazy.
The main problem with it, aside from the sports washing and Qatar covering the human rights, is that FIFA's been operating for over 100 years now outside of all these rules and regulations that, like, the Olympic Committee has to abide by, the World Anti-Doping Committee has to abide by, all these other international sports organisations have to follow certain rules and regulations, and FIFA's been allowed to skirt around it for so long, and that's why it's enabled these power-hungry people to take bribes and allow sports washing to happen.
It's pretty crazy though, because I mean, football is arguably the most popular sport in the world. The Champions League final, the World Cup final, I mean, those are the most important television events in most places in the world. Obviously, we're not going to enter, for example, in the cricket final in India or in Southeast Asia, and in obviously in Australia. Or, for example, some other sports that may get a lot of attention, like in the United States, you have NFL, which like the Super Bowl is also a massive. But FIFA first is
the most global.
It's the most global. I mean, FIFA accepts federations of countries that are not even recognized by the United Nations. It's the oldest still functioning international organization until today. It's the largest one too. So how interesting it is that those decisions are relegated to 22 people.
Exactly.
That's something crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, because of all this, it's come out now, it's changed, and it's gone back to how it was originally. So it's now a vote out of the, I think it's whatever it is, 190 member countries. They all now voting for the new World Cup spot. So they've dismembered this executive committee and made it everyone gets a vote instead of all these powers in 22 people's hands. So they've changed it now because of all this. But yeah, it is crazy that
it's a little bit, because it's a lot of money, it's a lot of soft power. Again, it's a lot of soft power in the hands of 22 people.
Milos,
I think this, like you said, this is that big backlash against Qatar is partly directed against FIFA because, as you stated out, it's one of the probably most corrupt international organizations. And I would also like to point out why Qatar is attacked so much, because they are not traditional football nation. This was their first World Cup, and I'm pretty sure this will be their last World Cup as well.
And they didn't get qualified, no, to the World Cup.
Because the host go
automatically goes through.
Only way they could qualify again if they
they won Asian Cup actually. So I mean, it's part of.
Yes, it was Iran.
No, Qatar won the Asian Cup in 2019.
They won it a few years ago, but I mean, also in the lead up to this World Cup, they played the winner of the Northern Irish League and lost 4-0 or something to a Northern Irish club.
But they did win the Asian Cup in 2019. So
yeah, they did.
Like they beat Australia, Japan, Korea, Iran. They didn't have a bad team. I don't know. So
and they used to. This is obviously decades ago now, but even in the Youth World Cup in the 1980s, when it was held in Australia, they got to the final of that and lost to Germany.
That's interesting.
Yeah, again, but this is mainly because they're naturalising a lot of citizens and they're getting a lot of South American coaches.
Yeah, that happened in handball with Qatar when they had also, I think, some competition, World Cup probably.
Yeah.
And most of them played are people from Balkan and from France that are
naturalized.
Naturalized.
I think the coach was
I don't think there was maybe only one or two actually Qatari players playing for them. So we could maybe see that in football. I don't know if it's...
yes, I mean...
What do you think about the sports washing situation then?
I mean, particularly with Qatar, I think it's become clearly on this... It's gone on the spot. I agree with Milos in this sense. I mean, this is... Well, also you've said it, like... Because of FIFA being in this scandal of corruption, that's why the focus has been put on Qatar. It was also put on Russia in 2018, but it was definitely not put as much as
because Russia played World Cup before, and
exactly,
and Russia were able to. I think the difference is Russia's able to fall back on an image already presented to the world, whether not many people would know of Qatar other than Doha Airport.
Russia still has because now they are all expelled from the competitions, but I mean Russia has good football team.
I mean,
they didn't qualify anyway, but this World Cup they didn't qualify. So, but yeah, I understand what you mean.
Host the Champions League final last year, as well. Like they've got a
football culture. Yeah. But then my question to everyone would be: do you separate those bribes from sports washing? is FIFA separate from Qatar winning? Because I think it's still a prestigious event for anyone to host, and I think Qatar as a nation, any nation wants to host the World Cup because it gives so much opportunity for exposure for your country. And I mean, it's a country with a lot of money that can afford to develop their country, and I think we've seen massive development within the country because of the World Cup. Do we call that sports washing, or do we call that they are trying to just build their own country? I mean, that's what any nation wants to do.
It's a way of it's. I mean, the corruption part. It was just a necessary part for achieving the sports washing.
But all the countries,
what we've seen is that FIFA worked in a corruption system.
Of course, FIFA is corrupt. We all know that. I mean, 2018, 2022 World Cups were at the same time, and every nation that was submitting a bid was told they would have to submit some extra payments along the way. Yeah. So it was not a well hidden fact that there was corruption going on. It was very transparent corruption. I mean, so this is not new information. Yeah. I just think that it's like we've been very quick, not us as this podcast, but I mean as the world, we've been very quick to nation Qatar as a sports washing World Cup. But I think really,
but I think a good question would be: would Qatar win the competition to host it, whether FIFA was corrupt or not?
Honestly, probably.
Based on the World Cup, based on the
they invested how much, like 220 billions. Like next closest,
220 billion. Yeah,
the highest spender I think was Brazil with 9 billion or something.
But also,
like that, so
I don't think you can take that money into account because Qatar's the most spent World Cup ever by over 200 million.
That's what he's saying. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. I think like if you're looking at how who would have got it if not, I think nearly everyone that is in FIFA or around it all agree that it should have been US's World Cup, and this is why they've got the next one.
But okay, next question then: why should World Cups only go to rich countries which already have developed infrastructure? Because Qatar is a very wealthy nation. I think it's one of the top 5 in terms of GDP per capita in the world. I mean, it's not well distributed, obviously, between the population, but it's not a poor nation. And at least in this instance, so much of that public money is going back into the infrastructure of the country. I'll just give you a few quick figures. They spent $45 billion on developing a new city called Lusail City, which is going to be home for 200,000 people after the World Cup. Then they spent $5.5 billion redeveloping downtown Doha in terms of modernizing it, putting new offices in
metro
there. Metro system. That's even separate, but that's this from the $5.5 billion, and then but also keeping that cultural significant areas as well. And then they've spent another $7.4 billion on a new port that's there. So these are all things that are going to stay after the World Cup. They've actually really invested this, so it's much better than an authoritarian leader just taking it for themselves and their family. So I would argue that this is actually not necessarily a good thing that the corruption's happened, but it's I think we see it with a very pessimistic light.
I do agree with you, but I think if you're looking at the World Cup and who should host it, FIFA say they want to improve and grow culture in football. So I think yes, obviously Qatar doesn't have much of a football culture, and this is going to give them a great chance to do it. But FIFA have all these other organisations and tournaments and that are done, whether you could do this, say, in America, and you've got 300 million people there, where football's not one of the biggest sports. And if you bring this big tournament there and all the flash and all the hype and that, I think if you're looking at it for FIFA in marketing terms, it makes more sense to go to a
I don't disagree,
but though, because there's one aspect of it, and it's with the money, because also, I mean, the president of FIFA, Joseph Blatter, he keeps on saying that this was done, there was a lot of money that then they could reuse in smaller federations, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it is true that they've grown these smaller federations also through, there's been bribes, and, again, I think it's the president of the Federation of Bermuda or Bahamas or something like this, that basically they were giving him some couple $1 million, and those couple $1 million were supposed to build a stadium, and he built the stadium with less, but he kept 1 million.
I mean, that happens.
It happens everywhere, but I think we can't really think about the money as Qatar spending all this money. No other country would. I think lots of other countries would, but they've got checks and balances. You're not going to see, Joe Biden spend $200 billion building stadiums and that. Like, he's going to be held accountable in Congress and the Senate and everything.
And they already have sports infrastructure.
Yeah,
And the World
They
Cups,
already have
they're always a losing game. I mean, like every organizer has lost money. I think every organizer has lost money.
I mean,
since the
it depends
80s,
how you
like this.
How
measure
much
as well,
in,
because obviously
tourism,
people only
direct
look at the
investment.
direct
But
investment
that's what I
versus the
mean,
direct outcome from the World Cup. But
Yeah.
the
But
long
it's an
term
investment on
infrastructure.
it's an investment on this soft power that were mentioned, because in the end, right now, I mean, Qatar has been developing several other things. I mean, Qatar has been developing the airport, for example.
That was part of it as well. That was part of the
improvement,
improvement plan.
Exactly, like all of these. Also, we are not like this. This is
Qatar-
an overarching plan. It's not
Exactly,
just organizing
Qatar.
the World
It
Cup,
wasn't
it's-
just 2022 World Cup. Whereas
Exactly, it's
Brazil is probably.
sponsorship
Look at Brazil
to-
now. Look at like
the
the
stadiums.
stadiums are falling into
ruined,
disrepair.
yeah.
It's like this is a
No, the Qataris are
well-planned.
dismantling though. I mean, at
Some-
least there's
Only
dismantling.
one.
One,
They're
and-
It was
dismantling
made
one.
from containers.
And
Exactly,
Yeah.
and they planned for it in advance. I would say this is much better system.
And they've said like I think it's a 40,000 seat stadium, the Stadium 974 or something, and they've already said like we're going to dismantle it and we can either move it or like share it with other Gulf countries, or we can break it down and make two 20,000 seat stadiums.
Nice.
instead,
Now
like
that
half
now
it.
that MBS has MBS, for those
Mohammed
of you
bin
who don't
Salman,
know, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown
the-
Prince of Saudi Arabia.
the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia today.
He's well, basically, if the Qataris now, because they've unfrozen their relations now with Qatar and everything. Now, if
They'll get the
But
stadium.
I would
they'll
argue
get the stadium.
I would argue this has been a good thing for all of the Arab world. I mean, they've been long shunned by the West as backwards Islamic, and obviously we see problems with the way they treat minorities in the country. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but I think they're not perfect. They're not perfect, obviously, but
They're
Qatar's
way
taken
from
big
perfect.
steps forward. Just in the 12 years since they won
Probably
the
one
bid.
of the most liberal
and
Muslim countries.
yeah, it is. I had a statistic. It is almost easily the most liberal country in the Gulf. There, like we've got Yemen, Iran, Egypt, Syria, UAE, all with index scores for human rights and rule of law at
Below the
above
Qatar.
9 out of 10 for for badness. I don't know why, in lack of a better word. Turkey 8.1, Qatar sits at 5.8. So they're way ahead of
Yeah.
like the rest of the Arab
Islamic
world right
world,
now, and they're setting the example about how the engagement for the West can be with the Islamic
I
world to
think-
try and.
I agree with you. I think the problem with Qatar is they're not advertising it well. They're not saying like, look, we've come this far since 2010 when we got the World
agree.
Cup,
It's-
and that's the problem.
It's a branding.
Exactly. It's almost
But-
like a marketing
but
problem.
I think
that
it's
they
a
have.
bit of a racism from the West.
Yeah,
That
like-
because it's an Arab country now, we haven't given them the opportunity to
Yeah,
say
like, I
that
think,
this
like,
is.
There is
our-
no benefit
Okay,
of a
that
doubt.
is actually
Exactly.
actually I want to put that question because as I said before, this sports washing thing has been going on from
Since the
before.
sport
Exactly, and I want to give a
Yeah.
couple examples on that.
Go back to history.
We go back.
we
back
need
in
a,
history a little bit.
We need our producer to produce a history
I am the-
flashback sound effect.
I am the editor. I'll try to add it later.
What's our producer doing?
She provided stuff. No, I want to touch about on two particular cases. One of it is the Olympics in '36. This has been brought up lately a lot. The Olympics in '36 happened in Berlin,
Yeah.
and
Hitler's Berlin.
Hitler's
Berlin. Already 3 years after getting into power and everything, and they were used by the Nazi regime to basically
As propaganda.
wash their image as propaganda. I mean, their objective was to show this Aryan man winning all these gold medals, whatever, and then you have Jesse Owens beating them, and it's a little bit. And actually, with that in particular, I want to put one thing which I found it really interesting, that when the Olympics in '36, I mean, this was the idea of the regime, and there were certain there was also a criticism already back in the day, particularly
The US was
the US was the strongest criticism. The Jews in the biggest Jew. It's an association. I can't remember the name right now. I should have written it down. They they actually voiced against
Boycott
this.
it.
They tried to boycott it, but as any other sports event, and I think we're gonna see it, it's not really easy to boycott the event. It also happened with the World Cup in '74 in Argentina. They tried to.
That happened with Olympics during Cold War. So if
Happened
there is a
with
will
the
for
Olymp-
boycott
exactly.
real, I think it could happen.
Like
Yeah,
the
if there's a real
real will, I think.
Yeah.
But if it's a
possible.
real and a relatively global boycott to it, because I mean,
But I mean, I think if America boycotts the United States, everyone will see it as illegitimate
But-
Olympic Games.
but
Because
I just want to come back to a couple of things. So basically, in the Olympics in '36 again, we have the Nazi regime legitimizing itself and showing how modern and how beautiful it was, and like the International Olympic Committee named it the best Olympic Games to date. It is also a little bit criticized the International Olympic Committee because they seem to be kind of like sympathizing with the Nazi regime. But this game, they were, I mean, they really created, they still, up till today, they still consider the best Olympics up till that day, which is true. I mean, they did put a lot of effort, as Qatar has put now, to bring this
Production quality?
this quality, this
General product to some.
this general product, exactly, this vision of it being something different. Like literally there's some
every
letters
country
sent,
does
there's
it.
some letters sent to the SA, the armed forces of the Nazi
Mm-hmm.
party, saying that they wanted to show how they wanted to show to the world that this lie that they were prosecuting and going after the Jews was not true, blah blah blah. Okay, all of this goes. So that is one example, and that happens. Another example I would like to give, because of where I come from, is not just the use of the tournaments in themselves, but of particular actors, which is particularly using one team, which we'll also touch upon, which is Franco's dictatorship, using Real Madrid as a face wash of the dictatorship. As soon as they won, Franco personally started like sponsoring the rise of Real Madrid as what it is right now. Real Madrid is a
global
Biggest
entity.
sports
It's-
brand.
Probably the biggest worldwide sports brand. If
I
you've
would
been
say
to, I've
so.
been to Asia, you've been to Africa, you see
Yeah.
kids
Everybody
wearing
knows
Real
for Real
Madrid
Madrid.
Everything.
Everybody knows
in the
for it.
street, you know, like
Yeah,
in Zimbabwe and
like
small
literally-
little town where they don't have a TV. The kids know
it
Real
is,
Madrid.
it is more or less known that Franco personally mediated between, like in the signature of Alfredo Di Stefano, who was the greatest player in the moment, for him to go, instead of going to Barcelona, to go to Real Madrid to promote this image of like unity in Spain, whatever.
Royal Club. Of course.
Yes, it's a royal club. I mean, it's always it's that perception. So it's something that it's not now. Then, as I mentioned before, we have 1974
Yeah, like,
World Cup in Argentina.
I would add even like two of the best probably boxing heavyweight fights happened as a part of sports washing, like
Saudi
Rumble in the
Arabia.
Jungle and Three Line Manila, both with Muhammad Ali, one with Mobutu in Zaire,
Yep.
President Mobutu, another in Philippines with President Marcos. So it's not
I'd change it to two other things as well. You got the new golf, the Live Golf, that
Yes,
Saudi
yes,
Arabian
yes.
backed golf, and also a complete sort of change, but Qatar own beIN Sports, the sports broadcasting,
which
So,
is
like,
global. I mean,
Which
is a
it's
global
like, but Qatar in that sense, this is not
It's
even
like
sports
another-
washing. I mean, because it's Al Jazeera and beIN Sports.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And
you
they're
have,
both Qatari, right?
you have beIN Sports, which is I mean, beIN Sports right now has the best commentators, has
exactly.
the pundits there.
Al
that-
Jazeera
with all
also
the-
provides
and
fantastic
Al Jazeera-
news
and
insights.
It's,
So,
as
How
I
I would
heard
say,
the other
like,
day, Al
another-
Jazeera gives you the best news except for talking about Qatar. Like,
yeah,
And
for sure.
That's another thing I'd point to. Like, people talk about people owning clubs and the tournaments and that, but Qatar are reaching into everyday life with beIN Sports and that, trying to promote a better image of themselves.
But does it? That's my next question. Like, does it really? Like, do people think...
How many people knows that beIN Sport
Exactly.
is from
And
Qatar?
no,
Or
exactly.
Al Jazeera as well. Like, I mean, it's only lefties really that listen to that watch Al Jazeera anyway. But
I
it's like,
I think for them it's just more of a thing that they can point to and say, look, we can do all this. We're not as bad as the other Gulf countries that you think, like, we're not as bad of a Gulf state as you think
Look
we
how
are.
open we are.
Yeah, like, look what we can do. We can provide all this funding and that. Just don't look any further.
Yeah,
Like,
they have
just-
big sponsor deals. They are sponsoring Barcelona, Qatar
They're
Airways,
sponsoring
right?
Barcelona,
And
yes.
Sydney
several-
Swans.
Emirates.
I mean,
my team in
the
Australian
United
football.
Arab Emirates are the third biggest sponsor in European football,
Yes,
behind
yes, yes,
Nike
yes,
and Adidas at the moment.
Yes.
And of course, Fly Emirates.
I mean,
is on
they-
Yeah,
several
but
top
10
And they-
years ago, they weren't even in the top 20 of sponsors.
Yeah.
So you can see in 10 years... they've
Why now
gone
Newcastle's just
But
been
we can
bought
see
by
that it's
by the
Saudi.
Saudis, yeah.
And talks about Ronaldo going to play in Saudi Arabia. as
Yeah,
well.
lots of talks about Ronaldo going to play for some exorbitant amount of money, 200.
No, he said no in the well.
he did say no today, apparently.
It's 8th of December. He said no.
We'll see I was going to say we need to wait and see how much money he gets
Can't take
first.
this.
But I wanted to point out something precisely because of what you're saying, if it works. Because there's an argument, and Infantino, the president of FIFA, was giving it, that, I mean, this helps the country to modernize, no? As we were saying. But my question would be, if these events, if the organization of these events, if the purchasing of teams, if this sports washing, could actually help improve the situation in these countries because of pointing out the wrongdoings in the countries. Because in the end, I mean, with Qatar, what's happened is that
Negative,
they wanted to have
PR.
a publicity, but for the last year, and especially in the last couple of months, it's just been crazy.
Constant
though.
negative.
Constant information on Qatar and the 6,500 dead workers according to NGOs and their anti-LGBT laws, their problems with their
Anti-alcohol.
anti-alcohol, undermining of women's
That's the one
rights.
that people cared the
all
most
these
about,
things. I mean,
the alcohol.
it did bring those issues to the light in a way, which at the same time, if you would have asked anyone about Qatar 2 years ago, yes, first of all, they wouldn't have known where it was, and second, they wouldn't have known that this was happening.
Yeah,
Exactly.
or they say, "What's Qatar? Is that for dinner?"
Or you'd have to say, well, I think any Australian in Europe would be like, oh, that's the place I stopped to go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, yeah. So like that would be my question. Like, do you think that it could, at the same time that it helps with this, with their image, do you think it could help at pointing out the wrongdoings on our own vision again? Because I saw the national teams. I saw the German national team, the Danish national team, the English national team,
All making statements.
all making
The
statements.
Australian
and
team did the big video.
it
but
was
the
like-
Spaniards didn't make a single statement because the Super Cup is played in Saudi Arabia. The Spanish Super
But
Cup
then
is played in
again,
Saudi
I would
Arabia.
say these protests are virtue signaling. If you really care about that, I think you would boycott it, not just make some empty gesture and still play in the World Cup.
But I think boycotting doesn't necessarily work to an extent because, like, you need, like we said before, you need a lot of teams to one
I agree, but still,
country.
for me, it means that you are not that.
Yeah.
That
That's
topic is
serious.
not important for you.
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
you don't
it's
want.
not-
If it's really important for you, you
But
should
also,
boycott
I
it.
think it's not I don't think it's fair to take the athletes out. Like, they're not politicians or
Yeah, but
making-
they're still making political
I know, but
gestures.
they've
in
trained
this World
all
Cup.
their lives for this. They're not expecting this to come up in their prime when some of them aren't going to play a World Cup again. It's not exactly fair to be like, oh, yeah, we're not going anymore. You don't get to play. And
Exactly.
your only chance for a World Cup. Like, I think you got to look at it for them as well. Like, they've trained all their lives. Like, yes, it's going to be a tainted World Cup, but at least, they get the satisfaction of being like...
Yeah.
like
we have our moral
like,
virtue.
like the Australians, they did the 3-minute video about it all, but there wasn't calls for them to be like, oh, don't go.
Boycott, yeah.
You've played really hard for 4 years trying to qualify. Like, you just qualified in a penalty shootout against
Because
Peru.
the location is circumstantial. What you want is the World Cup.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I think the boycotting, I agree that, like, it does make a good statement, but I think it's not fair to the players to take them out of something they've trained for their whole lives. It'd be like...
That might be a once in a lifetime.
Exactly, it'd be like
Yeah.
us right before we hand in the thesis, or I guess not Ronan, but the rest of us right before we hand in the thesis a week before the state exams to go, oh no, you've been kicked out of the course. Or something like, it's not fair. So I think that's my argument against boycotting.
In that sense, literally, there's a Spanish football player. It's called Héctor Bellerin. He was receiving an award some month ago. Some month ago. No, I think the World Cup already started, so it might have been like
Arsenal
2
left
weeks
back, Hector
ago,
Bellerin.
ex-Arsenal left back.
Barcelona.
I think he's being kicked there from there. I don't know where is he gonna play.
Yeah, I don't know where he's
Cool
going.
guy though. You need to check his clothing style. It's pretty cool.
He's
He's fashion. He's
a
fashion.
very
No, the guy is
fashionable
really
man.
cool, and he's really vocal with matters like this. I mean, he's really vocal with human rights, with social rights, with psychology, with taking care of psychological health and matters of the like. And when he was receiving this award, the World Cup already started. I'm pretty sure now because I remember more or less what he said. He gave this short speech where he said basically that at that moment that he was receiving the award, he would have loved to be in representing the Spanish national team in the World Cup, but he didn't get called. But at the same time, he was feeling good and bad. He was feeling bad because it is that once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, in the end, for the World Cup or for the Olympics, like you're the chosen, like you're literally the chosen. But that for him, he would have gone and played. But he would have been feeling bad. So in a way, not being called for the national team was a little bit of a relief
blessing
for
in
him.
disguise.
Exactly,
I
because he
think the
didn't have to
politicians
face
need
that
to do
situation.
more.
Exactly, he didn't have to face that situation. And I think that goes in what you were saying. I mean, in the end, when we are asking the footballers or the sportsmen and women to make a statement, if they do it, wonderful. I mean, you have wonderful experiences of footballers and sports men and women like making changes or like promoting some changes or whatever. But it's not their job.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not their job. And most of these people, they are young people in their 20s that maybe they don't have any freaking idea of what they're talking about, and they tell them,
Well, if you're a footballer, probably not. You got paid too much at a young age, and you've got no
but
idea.
if they tell them, hey, you gotta go and play in Qatar now for the World Cup, and again, like the Super Cup is played in Saudi Arabia, and in summer they play in the United States.
Or to extend further, if you
they
play
go-
for Newcastle now, you're playing for
exactly.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but I
And
think
so
they
it's the
should
same-
not care the players.
Exactly.
Like, I don't think they
I-
should make. I think they shouldn't make any political statements.
I think
I
Of
feel
course,
like they
maybe it's
can.
not- you
I think that they
but
can.
not exactly at the venue. Let's like do it for
Yeah,
on
I mean,
social media
I
or
think
something.
people have got to remember they're humans. They can make statements, but I agree. I think like
It's
en
like
masse-
not to discourage players or anything, not to diminish them, but like your job is to play the game, and I think you shouldn't be concerned what is the political
I
background
think
behind that.
I agree. I think that's when the politicians and that need to do more.
Okay, so to make a quick tangent now, just to still do with sports washing, but like a historical comparison. So we talk about Saudi Arabia and other countries buying teams using different means. If we look at the Cold War, we had America and Russia, or the Soviet Union, sorry, not Russia, but Soviet Union fighting over sports, basically. Like we had huge money poured in from both sides, and the prestige about winning. It was like the space race, the sports race. It was
And
everything.
especially in chess.
I was going to say,
And then
yes,
so. I think it's not a new phenomenon. I think just every country has done it historically. I think it's been brought to the fore now, and I think it really plays into the power of sports within geopolitics as a soft power tool, and how money can actually change sports as well. And I think it's super interesting. And what are your guys' opinions on how that ties into the current situation in Qatar? Like, where we've seen this progress from where it was a bipolar system.
I mean, that is really interesting because, as I was mentioning, the Spanish Super Cup is played in Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And Saudi Arabia and Qatar are those two enemies in the Gulf. So they've been sponsoring parallel events, and now, in my opinion, the buyout by the Saudi group of Newcastle United in the Premier League in England is a reaction of Qatar buying PSG. I mean, it's a reaction to that.
The richest club in the world.
Exactly.
Basically.
You have that fight, that geopolitical fight between the two entities that are in a geopolitical struggle among them two, fighting in the sports sphere over that, as the United States. Well, not at the same level, obviously, but as the United States and the Soviet Union was doing at the moment. And I mean, it's always a sense of pride to have your people there in
Be
in
the best in the world.
Exactly, be the best in the world. I mean, when the Soviet Union was still
The
alive,
Soviet Union.
the Soviet Union won the Euro Cup, for example, the football Euro Cup, and they were putting a lot of money there. Yugoslavia was a massively also sponsored team. They were both in basketball and in football. They were incredibly good. They also won the Euro Cup. The Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and then Brazil, West Germany, whatever, were always in the top 4, top 6, top 8 teams, both in basketball and in football. So I mean, I agree. It's something that it's not new.
I would say it's understandable why nations do that, because it's probably you have the biggest audience in the world that the whole world is watching. Definitely is World Cup. You have probably a couple of billion people that will watch the World Cup, at least the final. So it's not surprised that the nations will
this
do
year.
this year. No, because
I don't believe you.
No, I will watch it. Yeah,
You watch it when Morocco win, or
not talking about that.
But like I said, it's one of the more important parts of soft power, I would say, because not a lot of things that whole world will be watching. Sports is one of those things, I would say, and especially like we said in the beginning, it sparks emotions, either bad or good, but definitely nobody is like neutral when watching sports, even if you don't support some teams.
you pick a side.
You pick a side always. So that's, I think, great correlation with geopolitics in the end, and great power competition.
It's also internally, because I think that's the best of it. That's why the first question, I think, is the best of it. It boosts your own population to supporting this. Sorry for going back to Spain again, but like I know it really well. In 2010, when Spain won the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, the country was in a massive recession, peaks of unemployment, everything. Now, the 11th of July 2010, we were all in the street with our freaking Spanish flag, celebrating, blah, blah, blah.
Everybody's patriot when you
There
win.
was no independentist movement, there was no nothing.
Everyone
I
was
mean,
Spanish.
everyone was Spanish. There was always a player that was from your region or whatever, so you could identify with it. I mean, it was a general feeling of joy. It was, for me, it was the last moment of joy before everything just went to shit in the country. So it's a double-edged sword in that sense.
But losses could have the opposite effect.
Exactly,
of course,
it does have the opposite effect, but even when you lose,
nation unites around
even
something.
when you lose, if you don't lose in a bad way, if you fought like this feeling of like fighting, whatever, that still encourages
inspiring.
That still encourages this national view
Sentiment.
and there's national sentiment or whatever. So it's really interesting. But I wanted to touch because, well, I don't know if you had any more on saying on history and the historical part.
No.
Because I want to say one thing. We're talking about we've mentioned already a couple times PSG. I want to point it out, just like to make a map of more or less what it is now. For the last 10 years, there's been several teams that have been bought by conglomerates or directly by states, which have made the balance of power in European football shift, which is a lot of money involved. You have Qatar involved with PSG, with Paris Saint-Germain. You have the Emirates involved with Manchester City. And you have now, well, since 2021, Newcastle buying.
And we had, of course, Roman Abramovich and Chelsea. But
That's exactly what I wanted to say. Because it's not just the States.
2005, was it? 2006?
I think four.
Yeah, it was much earlier.
When they played semi-finals, that was, I think, before.
2004 they won the Champions League, though.
So maybe
with Mourinho.
That was sport.
That was
but
Porto.
that year was bought. I think that year when they played, but Chelsea played semi-final. I think that year they were bought.
But that's my point here. That it's not just states or whatever using this soft power. It's also individuals, wealthy individuals, to see their image related to sports instead of being related to anything else.
Shady business.
Exactly.
I mean, do people know that Wolves' owner, the Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are also in the Premier League, their owner is a guy who, I don't know his name, but he runs a company called Fosun International and is very closely associated with the CCP, the ruling party in China. So it's, again, everybody knows about the Gulf countries. We don't talk much outside of that. I think unless you're a fan of a club and then you don't like your particular owners and they're American and they don't want to invest, then you have a problem with them being.
Are you talking about Man United?
And Liverpool and Arsenal, like they all say the same complaints, right? But then other than that, nobody has a real problem with those people owning it, unless it's about them not investing enough money. The only time, even like Wolves, people that were happy that this Chinese businessman, which obviously got rich off the back of his close ties with the CCP, nobody had a problem with that. But people have a problem with the Arab states because
but I think
they see it differently. But I think a part of it is because of the racism against the Islamic and Arab world, honestly.
But then again, they have a higher profile and they are more connected, I would say, to the
more
state.
connected,
more. And they're
like
that's partly because they are, but they have they are specific in their own way.
I got one counter to that against. Being connected to the state, because Manchester City, prior to being bought by the current owner Sheikh Mansour, in 2007 they were owned by, for 1 year, Thai businessman and the former Prime Minister of Thailand, Thaksin Shinawatra, and he owned the club for 1 year, and he was the Prime Minister from 2001 to 2006. He got very, very rich as a businessman in Thailand, then became Prime Minister, and then very controversially sold off billions of dollars worth of shares in these companies and paid no taxes on it because he exempted himself from the laws. And there was huge protests and he got ousted in a military coup, and then he was allowed to take over the club. But it was a small time, but nobody had a problem with that in terms of...
Because it didn't destabilize.
So we're talking about only the fairness of the sport or something? Or
no, it's the destabilizing power with the ones that are in charge of the game so far. I mean, because, for example, the ones that have raising these concerns on the ones that matter, that have raising these concerns on the Arab states buying teams, having other great teams. Having Juventus, having Bayern Munich.
That are worried about their own status.
Really rich people.
Exactly,
like
they're owned by really rich.
Exactly, yes.
Exactly. None of those are poor clubs. Like they're all
like
owned by rich people that are worried that they're going to lose prestige.
But because it touched precisely because they are so big, when they raise that topic, it becomes. Boom!
They don't want a new player in the game that could potentially
they don't want
beat
a new
them.
player. That's when we put the focus on the
on sportswashing and
I think it's even boils down to even less so like, yes, the Chinese business tycoon owns Wolverhampton, but I think there's not as much of a problem with him owning it because he's not doing what PSG and Man City are doing, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on players, and I think.
But so Manchester United, so
Liverpool.
I know,
spent more.
Yeah, but no one has spent 222 million on any player.
PSG is an exception.
Yes, but I think that's the problem. I think because they have such a cash fund, whether for Man United, I'm a huge Man United fan. You try
your biases are showing here.
You try for years to try and.
I am a Man City fan just for transparency reasons.
You try so long to get these players, whether for PSG or that. They just
but Man United is not
exactly.
American money is better.
No, I know. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying
I wouldn't be pleading the pauper as a Man United fan.
I'm not. But I'm saying I think the difference is the critiques are coming from these Arab states because lesser teams like Brighton and all that aren't able to afford the same. Not obviously they're not going to be able to afford the same quality players, but. Neymar. I think the Neymar purchase by PSG was the sort of one that showed the financial disparities.
And they had Mbappe in the same year.
Yeah, exactly. I think
for clarity, I think it was 220 million euros and then 180 million euros.
And I think that showed the disparity. Usually there'd be a 30 or 40, 50
but
million
for the Premier League, there hasn't been that disparity at all. I think between the top clubs, there's about 6-7. They're all super rich.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Premier League isn't the Premier League's not.
But Man City, I think,
but there was backlash
against
Man City. Definitely,
I agree with Owen there.
I think if you look at every other league,
But then a question: would people be against it if some businessman from another country bought?
Agreed.
Newcastle
if
and brought the same money.
If someone from Peru came and bought Newcastle and said he's going to invest so much money, hundreds of millions of dollars into the club, billions of dollars into into Newcastle and it's Peruvian,
I
Peruvian
think
investor. Like, I just don't think it would be the same reaction.
I think the reaction would be similar on the stance of there needs to be a better financial fair play system. There needs to be like a more regulated system on who can buy clubs, how much money can be put into them.
But then
like,
you would need to limit, I would say, the already.
I know,
rich
you need to
teams,
change
so,
the
like-
whole. You need
I know,
to change the whole system of football. 'Cause
Yeah,
otherwise-
I agree. It's
I know, but,
unfair,
like,
but
I think,
it's
like,
it's
that-
the way
in
football's
sports, money
always.
was always the most important thing. In
like,
every
there's
sport,
one
not only
argument
football.
at the moment out there that the Premier League and other leagues around the world need to have a rebuttal test. So for new owners, they have to sort of rebut the fact and prove that they're not trying to just buy the clubs for...
But that's the opposite reason. That's to try and bankrupt the clubs, basically, right? To drain
No,
the
but
funds.
no,
and then-
not even that. It'd be
There's
like...
just been cases of that on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
now we're
no,
actually
it's
getting
not-
angry at the clubs for spending the money and investing
not
in the
a-
club. And then
One for that, it's more of a you've got to sort of prove you're not buying the club to improve your own image. You're buying it because you genuinely want
I'd be interested to
do
see
it.
how those tests.
But-
Okay,
Yeah,
but
that's
for that,
I would say
I will
subjective.
have two questions. The first would be, is the image of these countries actually improving? I know, as a matter of fact, that the image of individuals can improve if you relate them to sports, even if you just relate them to sports. Sorry to go again to Spain, but Real Madrid president is Florentino Perez. He's the owner of the biggest construction company in the world, and you will never see his name related to his company unless it's like sporadically related to that.
which
but-
company is it?
ACS.
ACS. I do
ACS,
know
they-
them. I do know that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course you know them.
I was a civil engineer.
Precisely. If you were a civil engineer and you were hired by ACS,
Spanish,
you know that it's
Spanish
just like
have a high
boom.
percentage of very big construction.
Yeah,
companies for some reason.
that's basically why we went to bankrupt almost in 2007, 2009.
Another story for another
No,
day.
but yeah, sorry for another day. But do you think? So the first question would be: do you think that this sports washing attempt, we could call it, is actually benefiting these countries? I want to put the focus a little bit in the golf because of what we are talking, because we're like the focus has been put on the golf. So do you think the image of these countries has been improved actually because of this?
I would say not. I think it just not improves, but how to say it reinforces the stereotype about the rich Arabs that want to buy everything of value in the West. Same could be said for Roman Abramovich, who was again like a poster boy for Russian oligarchs that are especially
Very close to Putin.
in England and in Britain that are
Yeah.
influential. So I would agree with you that it's more about the individuals. Even in individuals, I think it could have a bad effect. But for states, I don't think that anybody said, yeah, Qatar is good because they invest in PSG or
in the
UAE
World Cup,
India,
or in the World
Cup. Yeah, I think, like we said before, it brings negative PR when they are put onto spotlight like that, and definitely will be put on spotlight if you pay for a player 220 million. So.
No, I 100% agree. I think, yeah, it just puts more negative light on the country instead of getting the positive light that they're hoping for. And I think Qatar's a great example with this World Cup. Like, you know, you're seeing everything about it, from the backflip on beer 2 days beforehand to the 5-star luxurious hotels that they've put people up in, which are in shipping containers, basically in tents in the desert. Like,
Yeah.
you just see it. I think it really highlights the fact, because you're bringing in like hundreds of millions of people to come basically examine your country close up while you're watching football. Like, football's 90 minutes, but they're going to be there for weeks or months. They're going to see a lot more than just a game. So I think, yeah, it reinforces these stereotypes that they're just, wealthy people buying sports.
I'm just going to say, for me, I think we've got to separate club ownership from World Cup.
Organising events, of course.
Organising events. Like, club ownership, for me, they're not doing it necessarily for the same reasons. I think a lot of the time they're doing it for profit rather than... I mean, there's still an investment at the end of the day.
And like,
that's a second
marketing.
question, because
And-
in the end, like, you could also see, I mean, because there's an attempt by these countries, particularly the ones that are like oil producers and things like this,
They're trying to diversify their investments. Of course,
investments.
they see that oil's coming to an end. So I think that that's one case. Whereas the World Cup in Qatar, I think, has been unfairly lumped into the same category, because I think it's a legitimate opportunity for the country to grow, to develop their infrastructure, to show Arab states, like they're now a representative of Arab states on the world stage, which has never been given the opportunity before. There's no Arab country that's held the World Cup or held the Olympics.
Morocco is not Arab.
But he's about Qatar.
Okay, sorry.
Qatar, like they've had the opportunity to show the Arab world on the world stage, and I think they've done a really good job. I know you say there's been problems with alcohol, there's been problems with hotels, but I mean, these were known issues in the lead up.
You know where are you going. You know,
exactly.
I
mean, I've been to Morocco, but I haven't been to a lot of the Arab world. I would love to one day, but like, if I go there, I know that their customs don't necessarily want you to drink alcohol, and I think that's perfectly fine. You know it when you go there.
Cultural issues.
Exactly, but I think they've very well. I think they've.
I'm not saying that like we should be allowed to drink all that, but I'm just saying that, you know, Budweiser is the biggest sponsor, and they've been assured all these things in last minute.
Yeah. And that's a problem with FIFA again. I think FIFA as an organisation is extremely problematic, and I think we have much too much problem with Qatar, the state. I think, as I said before, I think they're one of the best performing countries in all of the Middle East. They have really invested so much money in infrastructure, which is going to last long after the World Cup, and I think we should encourage this sort of growth in the developing and the world that hasn't been traditionally included in these sort of things. And I think the whole world benefits from increased, integration between every country, being able to come together. So,
do you think that integration actually happens? Because the 2018 FIFA World Cup was in Russia. The 2021 Winter Olympic, the 2022 Winter Olympics were in China, just before the Russian invasion to Ukraine. Now this World Cup is going to be in Qatar. Well, it's going to be. It's taking place in Qatar.
We separate the sports from anything? We separate the sports from the state. So I think it's unfair to lump Russia into this because it's a state issue that's been long ongoing. I think it was also a problematic decision at the same time to award Russia their World Cup, because it was awarded at the same time.
But I think it was not
Qatar, but
not this much backlash against Russia.
There was zero. There was almost zero backlash.
But
against Russia.
I agree with that.
I had many friends that went to go visit the Russia World Cup from Australia. You know, I think there was almost no backlash. I think it's crazy the discrepancy between the two. And again, I think it's because Russia has been much more associated with the Western world for a long time,
and with football,
but with the Western world, people are more comfortable to go to Russia because
you can drink.
You can drink, and
no NGO came out saying that 6,500 people died in the construction of the infrastructure.
Again, but we don't know how many people did. I think there was more. I'm not saying it's good. I work in construction for a long time. It's a dangerous industry, but there was definitely not the safeguards that should have been in place in Qatar.
The deaths, I think, are the main problem for a lot of people. I think it's the system that brought them there, the kafala system. That, like, yes, there's been changes to it, but I mean, these people are going to this country getting promised all this work, and as soon as they arrive, passports are taken from them.
I 100% agree. This was a terrible system. I mean, and this has happened all across the Middle East as well. Let's not just say
saying it's only Qatar. I think,
or just from the World Cup. This happened before.
No, but I
think will continue to happen.
The World Cup, unfortunately, it is what I mean, and I think it
has on a bigger level for sure.
A lot of people are dismayed about, like, obviously, yes, there's going to be,
but I would argue that it's a good thing. It's actually brought light to the fact that this has been ongoing for a long time, and now people are actually more aware of it, but and actually more likely to.
The problem is, everyone, like Qatar, have made these promises that they're going to stop it, but you know, the world's after December 18, the world's most likely going to forget about what's happening.
They're even, honestly, with the PR that they're getting right now, if I were Qatar, I would try to make people forget as fast as possible.
But I mean, they've passed new laws in the process of the World Cup.
But there's a lot of lack of enforcement for these laws is the problem.
Of course. I mean, and it was like a huge infrastructure
Yeah.
undertaking in such a small time with such a small population, which they didn't have the resources to oversee these construction projects.
I know, but I still think there needs to be
properly. But the laws were put in, like they actually introduced new laws to. And I'm not saying that I think it's going to be perfect after the World Cup, but I think there's an opportunity now. The laws are in place. If they can, obviously there will be like a fraction, 1/100th of the construction going on. Then there might be a opportunity for the limited
I think like
inspectors
you've
to
seen the
enforce it.
International Labour Office come in 2018-19 to the country and that, and even then they've made recommendations and everything, and they've been put into place in air quotes because they've been passed in the government, but the International Labour Organization still come out and said there's been no enforcement, there's not a lot of change and that. So I think that's the main thing, and I think my worry is, World Cup ends December 18, all this media hype and attention and 3 billion people watching the country is going to just, like, that stop. Like, everyone's going to go back to Al Jazeera, Doha Airport. And
Exactly.
that, like, unless you're in the Gulf states and actually sort of affected by what Qatar's doing, you're not really going to be paying much more attention to it. And I think that's the problem with the World Cup, and that is, it's great there's all this intense pressure on countries to be better and protect people's rights, but after the tournament ends, it's not like you're going back for a review a year later and go, this is what's happened in Qatar over the past year.
Do you think it would backfire, this attempt of this sports washing? Do you think it will backfire Qatar in the long run? Because there's been such a focus put on that.
I think a lot of people are going to look back when we're older and say, oh, the 2020 World Cup, that one in Qatar, sort of with.
But not even when we get older. What I'm meaning is what you're saying. Like after the 18th of December, the World Cup finishes, blah blah. The following year, 2023, 2024, 2025, blah blah. When someone, we know more or less situation in different parts of the world. So there's terrible places. I wouldn't say Qatar is among the worst, to be honest, at this point in life.
You would,
but
no, it's definitely not. Yeah, thank you.
But that because of that media backlash that they've got, do you think that image of Qatar as like a controversial space where there's this lack of rights and whatever is going to stay?
Going back to a classic saying, no publicity is bad publicity.
Okay.
Like Qatar's, yes, it's not exactly how they want to be portrayed, but I think, this is a great opportunity for them to build on international relations and, compete with Saudi Arabia to be one of the leaders of the Gulf states. But I think at the same time, they're going to have a lot of work cut out trying to prove that they've actually implementing these reforms that they've passed and everything. Like, I think, obviously, there's a long way for them to go, but I think, it'll be important for them, like, as a step for them to be able to use it as a stepping stone into, oh, look, we hosted the World Cup, we're a big player, we compete with Saudi Arabia, like, we host sporting events and everything. So, I think it's a stepping stone for them, but I think it's going to need a lot of talking about and reform instead of just, this is what we're going to do.
So it may actually pressure them, in your opinion, to actually.
I think it already has pressured them. Like, we've seen reforms in the kafala system. There's been an introduction of a minimum wage and all that for migrant workers. So there has been
improvements.
Yeah, like we said before we recorded, Qatar's developed more in 12 years than it has in its history. Like, it's
by far
been a crazy transformation for the country, and I think, like, people need to realise that. But then also, if Qatar wants to be one of these world players, there needs to be more. I think there needs to be a little bit more done for them to be able to say, like, yes, we can be an international player. Like, they're already now trying to host diplomatic talks, be like a peacekeeping nation and host talks between countries. So I think...
Yes, they were, I would like to point that out, actually. They were the ones that held the talks between the Taliban and the United States.
Exactly. So, like, they're trying to grow into this role, but I think in order for them to grow into this role, they need to make some more reforms, because they're not as lucky as countries like China and Russia, who have had these sports washing claims, but can fall back on history and say, well, look at all this we've done. Like, Russia, for example, can go, oh, we defeated the Nazis. And all that. Like, Qatar doesn't have that privilege of looking back in history and reminiscing on it.
The next World Cup is in Canada, United States, and Mexico. And Mexico as a state has huge problems.
Exactly.
And will there be the same backlash? That's the last thing I want to ask. Will there be the same backlash against Mexico?
No, because first of all, is the United States. Yes, I know it's North America. I know it's North America.
all three,
it's
but
Mexico, Canada,
but
and the United
80%
States.
will be in USA, I think.
It's 80% in the United States, and like the United States is gonna put as much. If they already pressure Mexico for everything, they're gonna put everything that they can to make the World Cup as safe as possible.
Because some authors have already called
imagine.
Mexico a failed state.
Some people even here would
That's
call
for
it.
another episode.
That's for another episode.
Oh,
that's
I'm
why
writing that
that's
down
why I
for
was just,
another episode.
That's why I was just like, just as a quick
Mexico
final,
a failed
as a
I
quick
don't
final
think
thing.
they will. I think, you know...
Because it's different. Like, it's not
But
that
there's not gonna be
Mexican
different
state is pushing drugs and things. It's like cartels, not like Mexico.
Yeah.
They have
Like, I think, like,
major
yes,
problems
it's-
with
the World Cup
drug violence, but then again,
There was
it's
which
not
is better.
2014
Which
World
is
Cup,
better.
2014
That's-
World Cup, no, 2014 World Cup in Brazil, 2010 World Cup in South Africa.
Yeah.
You're telling me the insecurity problems, I know it's not the same level
course,
of Mexico, but the insecurity problems in Brazil
And the
and South
corruption
Africa
levels
are
in
massive.
South Africa as well at that time, and Brazil. So
I mean,
and there was
every
no
World Cup's
backlash.
been plagued
Yeah.
by corruption. Like, you can look back on it as soon as
I mean,
João Havelange, the Brazilian, gave it to Argentina, the junta. It's been, since then, there's been corruption.
Yes,
but
yes,
I think Mexico just quickly will be different. There won't be as much because there's only going to be a few games in the country.
and all people
And
from
I think they're
cartels gonna watch the
they're
games.
gonna, in my
probably.
opinion, I mean, they're just gonna put them
And I
in
think
the DF or like
there's
you're gonna have a
much-
couple more places in Puebla. Maybe they have a good stadium too.
And
Like
I
they're
think
gonna
like
leave it in
the
those.
problem with Qatar is associated with a lot of the critiques are coming from also like they're not a footballing. Like, yes, they
Yeah.
play football, but I think a lot of it
go
is
back to
like a lot of countries that didn't make the World Cup are like, well, how come they get to like why are they hosting it? Why are they playing it? They've never been in one. They rank like worse. They're not even in the top 100 countries.
they
in
were
the-
ahead of Australia, I think, going into
Were
the
they?
World Cup.
Okay, well,
FIFA rankings.
They were, ahead,
but yeah.
they were ahead of Australia, but that's not because of Qatar's.
And we almost beat
good, that's because of
Argentina.
your
Let the
fault.
record
Exactly.
state
We
we
almost
almost
beat
beat
Argentina.
Argentina.
but I
You
think
know who beat
that's-
Argentina? Saudi Arabia. That's a good sport.
and Morocco.
But I think
No,
that's the
Morocco
thing. Like a lot
Morocco
of
beat us.
countries are
Morocco
very
will,
jealous
that's the prediction.
about it. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
countries are jealous because they're playing in it. Whether, like, you know, a lot of Asian teams, like Egypt, didn't make it, for example.
Yeah.
And Egypt have a long
Football
footballing
history.
culture and history, and I think that's sort of a lot of
So it's-
dismay that they've taken a spot from a team. But also, like, it happens every World Cup. The host always qualifies automatically. So
It's also,
Let's-
guys, it's also the first World Cup in Asia. Like, it's.
it's not the first World
first
Cup in
one.
Asia.
this one in Korea.
Oh,
First
sorry,
World Cup in
First
Middle
one
East.
in
World Cup in the
Middle
Middle
East.
East.
Yeah.
The
But-
first World Cup
And that's
in
what I
the
think,
Middle
like,
East.
a lot of countries as well see other countries like Egypt and that who have attempted, like, have put in bids before to host
Yeah.
the World Cup and not get it, and now it gets to Qatar.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I'm not saying Egypt's any better or any worse, just saying that they've been in
Right
the
They're more
now,
a football
right now,
country than Qatar,
right now,
at
I'd
least.
much
Yeah.
rather be living in Qatar than
I know,
in
but I'm
Egypt.
just saying, like, there's a much more of a
football.
footballing
Yeah.
culture and history and,
Mohamed Salah.
yeah, exactly, like the proudness of their football. And they've been putting in bids for years to host it, sort of thing. And I think that's where a lot of the sort of criticism for them hosting it.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. It's been
Yeah,
fascinating discussion.
I think I think we can leave it from today.
I mean, we could talk for another 2 hours.
we could talk for like 2 hours, but guys,
we
if
love
you want to-
geopolitics and we love
That's
sports. So
We
this
love
is a problem you get us
No,
to.
guys, don't lie. 80% of this conversation has been on football. So like, it's if anyone understood the game, then the teams that we were saying, no, but it's
Please, I mean, we want to hear people's opinions on.
it is a really
sportswashing.
interesting topic. Yeah,
I
because
It's as you said, it's been brought to the fore recently, and like
exactly, it's like
interesting.
suddenly this is like there's like this is the glass breaker in a way.
Yeah.
Like suddenly you realize
The
that this is happening.
conversations
Like we saw it before, but no one cared because it's another soft power tool. But suddenly it's in the table because Qatar is doing it, and because because everything surrounding it.
Thank you, Milos Dangubic. Dangubic, and thank you, Owen Sutherland, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ronan, for joining us.
Thank you, Juan, as always.
And thank you very much, you that you're listening.
If you survived this long, we appreciate it.
If you survived this long, we appreciate it. Leave something on the comments. If you survived this long, just write okay.
Then we know.
Put which team you support in the comments.
And or just write if you're watching the World Cup or if you're boycotting it. That would be fun to see. In any case, thank you all for listening, and we will be waiting for you. Well, no, we will be here again
and
next
we'll be
week.
catching you again.
We'll be catching up again with more the Geopolitical Pickle. Don't forget, now we have weekly news roundup, map of the week. No, guys, this is growing a lot. You definitely should follow us. So leave us a follow, leave us a comment. If you liked it, thank you very much for being here, and we'll hear you. Well, you'll hear us in the next week. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Geopolitical Pickle.
We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
In the meantime, follow us on Instagram for more behind-the-scenes content.
And subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast.
Thank you, and see you next week.